So I've never been so either injured or ill that my life was placed in the doctor. And I've never been in a burning building where a firefighter had to come and rescue me out of it. Nor have I been in a situation that was so perilous that I needed either a police officer or a soldier to come and provide me protection in the midst of that. And I know that's not everybody's story, but that is a part of my story. I've never had to have somebody take my life in their hands, at least not that I've ever realized. That doesn't mean that there probably weren't times where my parents did things that kept me from doing really stupid things when I was growing up. That doesn't mean that, and I think most of us are in a situation where, we are one thing away from being in a situation that we need somebody else to help us out of. We need somebody else to be able to pay a debt that we can't, to bring us out of a situation that we can't rescue ourselves from, to have the knowledge that is needed to have that cure or that assistance that we need. But I think so many times we just take for granted the things that we have that make everything seem to go like it goes. And I say this not to kind of lift myself up as, hey, here's all these ways in which I've taken care of myself. I'm by no means a person who believes I've pulled myself up by my own bootstraps. I've been allowed to be in certain situations, but I also know that when I start talking about these stories that we have today, the story of Naaman the Syrian, and the story of these 10 lepers who need healing, that they're in a different starting point than I am. And I'm going to talk about both of these stories. I'm going to start with Naaman, and then I'm going to move into the New Testament, the 10 lepers. And they are related, but there are differences within the stories. And I'm going to do something that to help, I think, bring a little bit of, I hope, a little bit of insight into the stories themselves, because they're both very short stories. But there are things that when you read closely, at least I notice, that I think are interesting. So starting with Naaman. So Naaman he's the commander of the armies of the king of Aram. He's a person who has a lot of authority, and he's had a lot of success. And this is a time when this is in the time of the kings of Israel. So Israel and Judah have split. They're two nations now, and neither of them are very strong. And so they're constantly being attacked and harassed by other nations. And Israel, the northern kingdom, at this point is basically a puppet nation of Aram. So here is the general, or the commander, who has led the forces that has put the armies of Israel in their place. And the irony of the story is he can do all these great things, and yet he is a person who, to the Israelites, would have been unclean. He has this skin disease. He has this disease that others would look and say there's something physically wrong with him. And as I was thinking about the character of Naaman, something stood out to me. So I'm going to take a little break from this story and go into another fictional story. Well, not that the Naaman story is fictional, but go into a fictional story. So I'm guessing some people in here read or watched the movie Pride and Prejudice. Okay, very few. Okay, well, let me see if I can tell the story of Darcy. So Darcy is one of the main characters in this story, and he is a very wealthy landowner, and yet he comes to this area where the people don't know him, and so he comes off as being very aloof, very hard to get along with, very difficult. In fact, maybe even just downright stubbornness. And many of the people in the area formed this immediate opinion about him. But part of the story is you get to know, you get to go into more of who he is, because it's more by whisper. So they go and they visit the area where he actually lives, and in comparison to the way people have perceived him, all the people who work under him love him. All the people who are part of his plan think he's wonderful. And so there's this difference between the way he appears at first and then what everybody else who knows him best perceives him, whether it's his peers or those who work under him. And I think sometimes one of the best testaments to who a person is how do the people who work under them, how do they talk? Not the people who are at the same level, but the people who have to work under him. The reason I bring this up, pay attention to how the people who work under Naaman responded. So we have a servant girl who comes, who is, she's a captive. She's captured from Israel. She's taken from her home. She's taken from her family. She's now in the household of Naaman. She works for his wife. And she could easily stay silent. So, most of you know I served in the Army, and most people who haven't served in the military, I think, assume that, the captain tells the lieutenant, who tells the sergeant, who tells the private to go do it, and it just happens that way. And there's a little bit of truth in that, but there's a lot more nuance, because there has to be a level of trust there. If you have an officer that you don't trust, and they tell you to do something, you do what you have to do. But if you trust the person, do what you're going to do because you trust them. And the way that turns out can be a life or death difference. There is this level of trust that has to be there. And how I think most people have probably worked for bad bosses. You did what you had to do your job at that point, not what you were going to do to make the company grow or make the office better. Well, so here's this captive woman, and she is in the household of Naaman, and she respects him enough to say, say to her mistress, if my master was in the presence of the prophet that's in Samaria, he could heal him. And so this sets in motion a little bit, which we don't see in the story today, because they skip a couple verses. And so Naaman goes to the king of Aram, and the king of Aram writes a letter to the king of Israel, and that's what happens when the king of Israel receives this letter, which we don't hear about, and all of a sudden he's received a letter in the text that we see today. And then he tears his clothes, and then Elisha says, send him to me. And so he goes to Elisha, and he rolls up, and he's brought not only with him a lot of wealth, but he's brought with him several of his people who are closest to him, and several soldiers. And so he's making a show of going to there. And again, Elisha doesn't even come out. And he gives him the command, go and wash in the river of Jordan 7 times, and you'll be clean. And Naaman, again, we may look at this initial reaction and just say, he gets angry and he just throws a fit, and, no, we don't need to have any compassion on him, but look how the people under him were. There's something about this guy, because the people under him, if they didn't like him, they just let him throw a fit and go away. But they go and they make that risk and say, now, I know this seems like a strange thing. I know that you're angry right now, and I know you didn't get responded to the way that you thought you would be responded to. I know this is not happening the way that you imagined it in your mind happening. But if you've been asked to do something hard, wouldn't you have done it? So how hard is it to go and do what the prophet has said? Why don't you just go ahead and go and wash in the water Jordan, wash in the river Jordan? So he does. So twice in this very short story, people who have, every reason where they could stay silent, don't. Goes and he washes, and other people have interceded for him. And so he finally does, and he washes, and he's made clean, and he goes back to Elisha, and now he finally gets to see Elisha. Elisha comes out, And again, this is part that we don't get to hear because the story goes on beyond this. So I think most of us, when we go to the doctor, and the doctor gives medicine that we need to get better, we expect that shortly down the line there's going to be coming a bill. At least that's been every doctor experience I've ever had. And nothing against people who work in the medical profession. I know they have to get paid, and I know that's a part of that. But what makes Naaman angry next? So Naaman's brought an obscene amount of wealth with him on this journey. So he's brought 10 talents of silver. He's brought a lot of gold with him. He's brought clothing. He's brought all kinds of stuff that he is intending to, if you can heal me, this is what your payment is going to be. And Elisha refuses all of it. You see, Naaman's expecting a transaction. You heal me, I give you all of this. And Elisha says, you've been saved, you've been healed, and it's free. This is what grace is about. Now, I've also been in that situation where, well, tell me what it's going to cost. Don't give me something for free. Don't give this to me for free. I want to be able to say, I earned this somehow. I've done something for this somehow. And again, another little piece of the story that comes afterwards. So one of Elisha's, for lack of a better way of saying, prophets in training, decides, this guy shouldn't get off. So he goes on a journey after him and eventually flags him down and says, well, give us a portion of this so we can train a couple more prophets and we can do all these things. And again, Elisha will have none of it. This is not what we're in this for. We're not healing people to be made wealthy. In our culture, when a person gets sick, there are times when they have to be isolated for patient purposes. But for the most part, when a person gets sick in our culture, we don't attach a kind of moral stigma to it. You've got, you didn't have a heart attack because you did something wrong. You don't have pneumonia because you somehow offended God. But that wasn't the way that viewed by people in the ancient world. And particularly when it came to leprosy, it was a disease that was viewed as not only something that, not only were you untouchable, but there were a lot of people who thought, well, somehow it's your own fault that you're untouchable. Somehow you did something wrong. And I think the only modern kind of correlation we had to this was back when I was growing up with AIDS, early 80s. Thought that, somehow these people had this. Somehow it was some kind of stain on their character or something like that. We were wrong then. And but I do think that to understand that, when it comes to leprosy, and again, a wide variety of skin diseases that were considered this, but when you had some kind of affliction on your skin, not only was it you're sick, but you're no longer allowed to be a part of it. You're not holy. You're touchable. You're irredeemable. You are beyond it. And somehow you are not only marked, you're dangerous now too. And so, leprosy among, and again, what we translate as leprosy, and again, it's a wide range of skin conditions. In the Bible, it takes up 2 chapters of Leviticus trying to detail all the different ways in which the priest is supposed to do certain things to diagnose and to say this person could be in, this person could be out. But ultimately, it was one of these things where these are people who now no longer has any responsibility. They are the outside. They are beyond what the average person can do. The only way for them to be back a part of the community is somehow be cured, be made better, and there's nothing that cures. So these are the people who are standing there, and again, they're in this borderland, between Galilee and Samaria. They're in this place, and they call out to Jesus, and they say to Jesus, "Master, save us! Master, help us!" And they do what's right. They keep their distance. They don't come and approach Jesus. So many of Jesus' healing miracles, and even when it comes to people who have leprosy, so many times Jesus touched, but these, they keep their distance. And Jesus says to them, okay, go and present yourself to the priest. And sometimes what happens when you have something that is different than what everybody else has, you have your own little new community. People who've had you form support groups, form support networks, because only certain people know what you've gone through. Only certain people know what you've been a part of. But I think there's something interesting that happens in the story, and again, it's not something that's explicitly said, but it's almost something that there's an echo of. So as they're going, and as these 10 are walking away, one turns around and starts exclaiming loudly. Runs back to Jesus. Now, what the absence in this story makes me wonder is, has this one already been separated from the rest? I wonder if the other 9 had really seen and paid attention, if they'd all been walking together in the same direction. They'd seen one of them start praising and run back, wouldn't they say, well, maybe I need to do the same thing? But maybe, just maybe, once that same thing that made them all part of this community of outcasts gone away, maybe some of the same things that would have kept them apart before apart now. Remember, this one is a Samaritan. And one of the things about the Samaritans in this culture is, again, they're all told to go to the priest. Well, even though Samaria is located between Galilee and Judea, there is kind of this long history, and there's this loss of the priesthood for a lot of Samaritans. And so they may not have a priest, or they may not have the same priest that they would go to. And so these others may have been going in one direction, this one may have been going in a different direction. One sees and the others see as well, but the reaction is different. And again, I think sometimes we react differently because, we realize let me put this a little different. I think sometimes we in church, and this is one of the great places where I think the puppets got it straight on. Sometimes we in church, we come to God and we pray, and then something happens. And we say, well, that's just what God does. Thanks be to God, but that's just what God does. I think some people who maybe don't have that same type of connection something happens, and all of a sudden it's a huge turnaround for them, and this came out of nowhere, and this is not what they expect. I do think there are times where we become immune to all the things that God gives us because we just kind of expect it to be there. And I think sometimes it takes seeing the way somebody outside our community reacts, outside this community where we expect grace, how they respond to grace, see, wow, that's what this really means. And why am I not? Now, I do think that part of our lives, we do live in this place where, all of us at some point in our life need somebody else. Need somebody else to come in and do something for us. And sometimes we realize it and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it may be something that's huge. A person comes and pulls you out of a burning car. Sometimes it may be that person who says, I notice something's not right. Tell me what's going on. Sometimes it's the person who says, I see how hard you're working, and I'm going to make sure that you get that next promotion. So there are all kinds of times in our life where I do believe God works either directly or through others. Give us that which we need to protect us, to save us, to make us whole, to bring us to be a part of the community. And again, I think that sometimes we forget how fragile our life, how much we need one another, how much we could easily be, how easily we could be in the situation that the people in these stories are, whether Naaman or the 10 lepers, where we need to call out to somebody else to save us, redeem us. And again, it would be very easy to be back in that situation where Naaman is, to do it in terms like we do in the rest of our lives. How much do I owe you? How much do I have to pay you to get what you can offer? And again, I think that's one of the struggles that, as we as church, we as particularly as Lutherans, grace is free. That was part of the break with the Catholic Church early at that point was, here's what you have to pay to earn this grace. Well, grace is free. And lots of systems of belief, not only religious, lots of beliefs say there is no grace. There is nothing free. There is no free lunch. There is no free salvation. Here's how you have to earn it. And again, I think for many of us, get back into that world of thinking of what do I need to do to earn this? What do I need to do to earn being seen and recognized and being brought back into the community, being made whole? Serve a God who says, you are not irredeemable. You are made whole. You are set free. You are able to go and be and recognize what God is doing in the midst of your life. I think that's part of what faith does. Faith allows us to see beyond ourselves and see what's happening in a different way. May you not have to be in this week in a place where somebody has to save you. But may you be in this week in a place where you can give thanks for what God has done through others. May you not need to be in this place, in this week, in a place where you feel unsafe, or where you feel ill, or where you feel in need of protection. But may you be in this week in a place where you see how God has healed you, or how God has provided protection for you, where God has made life possible for you in a way that is not possible for everyone. And may you have your eyes open enough to give thanks to God for all God has given.